Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. I'm going to get all that stuff ramped up very soon because training camp is just around the corner. But there is one big question hanging over the Commanders as we sit here today. And that, of course, is Terry McLaurin's contract extension. So today is going to be all about that. I'm going to have on in a minute. I'll be talking to Joel Corry. I'll have play my conversation with Joel Corry from CBS Sports, of course, a former agent and also very, very adept with the salary cap, with the numbers, gives you an agent's take. That's why I want to have Joel on. So a lot of good discussion on what a McLaurin contract could look like, what would be fair, what are some comps, and we even get into like trade scenarios, whatever. I don't see it. We're way miles from that. Anyway, so stay tuned for Joel. Before I get there, one thing with McLaurin, or couple things. First of all, before I get to that, I got to give you another talk about Huel. I like that product. They're back as a sponsor. I'm a fan of their Black Edition for a couple of reasons. It's 40 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals. Folks, when I'm in a hurry, I don't feel like making a big breakfast. That's what I turn to. Pour it over a little bit of ice, give it a little bit of chill. I feel good. It costs less than $3 a bottle. You're getting a meal. My favorite, strawberry banana and chocolate. So new customers get 15% off at huel.com. That's huel.com when you use my code KEIM, of course, KEIM. So that's 15% for new customers using my exclusive code KEIM, KEIM, at huel.com. Please see our description for the terms and conditions. Skip the stress, not the nutrition. Try Huel today for your complete nutrition. So now you need some nutrition for your soul, and that's about McLaurin. McLaurin will be talking to the media on Tuesday after he does an Eastern Automotive shoot. So stay tuned for that Tuesday morning. I don't know what he's going to say. The fact that he's going to talk about this, we know that there's certainly you hear the grumblings about is there some frustration perhaps with this. Of course, happens in a lot of contract extension negotiations, but so it'll be interesting what he has to say. One thing we know about McLaurin is that he's very much a true pro. He's not going to pop off and just come out angry and swinging. That's just not his style. If he did that, I'd be surprised because it runs counter to the guy that I've known since he came into the league. And there have been times, shoot, you remember the time in New York where he had a tough game against the Giants, didn't get the ball a lot, and he got his point across in a very professional manner that did not create these negative headlines. But he got his point across. That's kind of what I'm expecting from him here. And again, it is after an Eastern Automotive shoot, so I don't know what he'll say. And here's the one thing unfortunately, I will not be there because as you can see, I'm in a hotel. I'm up in Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN headquarters doing some work. So I'll be here for a few days. I won't get back till after McLaurin's press conference. But there will be people there. I will be monitoring it. I will get some video from there, and I will be writing a story, I'm sure, on it later in the day for ESPN.com, depending on what he has to say. And I don't know what he's going to say, but he will be available. This is hanging over everybody's heads. We all know that. We didn't see him at the mandatory minicamp because he wasn't there. And when he was here for OTAs, we weren't there. So, when he was here early in the spring, we weren't allowed out there yet. So by the time we could get out there, he was off. So this will be our first or the media's first chance to talk to him. So we'll be curious what he does indeed say. Um, Now, I know some people start worrying about trades and all that. Like, folks, we are a million miles from that. And the one thing I'll say, I know people brought up Pittsburgh and TJ Watt. Pittsburgh's not doing that deal because they just signed DK Metcalf to a really big deal. You're not going to give up a player at arguably the most impactful position on defense for McLaurin and then have to pay. No, so anyways, and I don't know, again, we're a million miles from this, but if we get to that point where there's trade talk and all that, the hard part to wonder based on what you hear is would somebody trade and then pay McLaurin that? So I've always told you this, and I don't know that because it only takes one team. But one thing I do know, I told you this was always going to be a tricky negotiation because of he's turning 30, but yet over here they say, yeah, but he's his play hasn't dropped off. He hasn't been in the league. He's only been in the league since 2019, so it doesn't have the same wear and tear as somebody who maybe came in the league at an earlier age and yet was going to 10. It was like Mike Evans was going into his 10 or playing 10 years. So just a different situation. So that's why it was always going to be tricky. But that's why I wanted to have Joel Corry on to talk about all of this. And he was really good. So also one note, on Thursday, I'll be talking to Nick Hill, who is Debo Samuel's offseason trainer. He works for Exos and he's out in Arizona. Debo Samuel has been working with him since before he came into the league. And so Nick knows him very well, gave me some good insight into what he has seen from him this offseason. Now, it is somebody who works for him, but he does know Samuel very well. So I think you'll enjoy that. That will come out on Thursday. And then, of course, next week, we start getting into training camp. Anyway, so we'll get that next week. But that's it. That's it for me. Here's my conversation with CBS Sports, Joel Corry. Well, Joel, I appreciate you taking out a few minutes during the summertime to talk about the Terry McLaurin situation. But first, for folks listening, Joel wrote a really good analysis of the McLaurin situation for CBSSports.com. Go check that out. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, or not a little bit, a lot about that. So I don't know if you can sum up the article, but it kind of seems like the headline sums it up. This is a complicated situation. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, it's complicated because Terry was an older rookie. He came in at 24. He turns 30 in September. He did the 3-year deal so he could reap the benefit and get a second bite of the apple. But that three, as the first digit of his age, is problematic because you don't have 30-year-old receivers who command top of the market money. All the guys who are signing the big deals are in their mid 20s. So that's the biggest issue. He's going to say, you know what? I'm not slowing down.
Right.
There's no signs of a fall off. I had arguably the best year of my career last year. I'd never been named to an all pro team. He was a second team all pro last year. So he's going to go, I got 3, 4, 5, 6 good years left in me. And this isn't the only team around the league where that 30 or 30 plus number is problematic. The Bengals don't have a deal done with Trey Hendrickson. Part of it is he wants a longer term commitment. They want to go shorter term because he turns 31 in October.
And so I remember talking to you earlier this offseason, you felt like DK was maybe a comp. Who would you be looking at to get a good comp for McLaurin at this point?
Yeah, because he's not going to think age is a major consideration.
Right.
Obviously, the Commanders are. He's going to look at the DK Metcalf deal for a couple of reasons. One, it was done this year. It's not a great structured deal from a player standpoint. It's kind of backloaded. It's got 35.5 million in the last year. It averages just a shade under 33 million per year in the new money. Metcalf is in the same 2019 draft class as McLaurin. 2-year age difference. He's 2 years younger. So that is a factor. He's been more productive than Metcalf. His best season was 2020 in Metcalf. That's when he was a second team All Pro, made his first Pro Bowl. Wasn't a 1,000-yard receiver last year, but Metcalf has something you can't teach. 6'4", 230-pound receivers who run like the wind don't grow
Right.
on trees.
Right.
And that's not Terry.
So who else? Because again, I know in the article you brought up Mike Evans, and I'll cite that because the age, but it's not a contract that they would ever give him because you couldn't. So because again, he's one of the few guys who are 30. I think Tariq was around 32, but so where's another comp that maybe the team might look at, and maybe is there a place to get in the middle there?
Yeah, you can't use Mike Evans for a couple of reasons. Mike Evans was basically going to be 31
Right.
when he signed, or he's going to be
Mhm.
31 the season last year. But it was misreported. Agents always report a deal as the max value, or not always, but some do. Some use for recruiting purposes. When you actually got the contract, you're like, that's not 26 million per year.
Right.
The base value was 41 over 2, 20.5 million per year. $11 million in escalators and incentives that he's never going to earn. So that would be a pay cut looking at the base value. So you got to
Right.
throw that out of the window. Tyreek Hill's 30, different situation, had 3 years left on his contract, straight negotiation. So they were, and you don't see that a lot where a team will rip up a deal and not get any new years in return. He was 30, but he's a bad comp for McLaurin for this reason. He had a bad year last year at 30. So that points to the Redskins going, see what happens when you turn 30.
Right.
There aren't any really good comps for a 30-year-old receiver making that type of money. So that's what makes this kind of challenging.
So what do you do then? And here's the other thing, like what other factors should this team weigh? Like I know, this is a guy who's been, the face of a franchise for a few years. Like should that factor in, or should you just look at like what's it going to look like over the next 3 or 4 years? What factors should be first and foremost here?
Well, you pay a guy for what you expect him to do. So the Commanders need to figure out or decide, what do we expect Terry to do over the next 3, 4, 5 years if he should play that long at a high level. And if they think he can keep doing what he's been doing, because he has 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and it's come with a rotating cast of less than stellar quarterbacks. He finally has one. So if you think that he's gonna stay at the same level, maybe get a little better productivity wise, then you should go ahead and pay him. If you think he's gonna start declining, then you got a problem. Another factor you got to look at is, what if he plays out the contract? What are your options?
Right.
You could let him leave, and then you're getting at best a third round compensatory pick in 2027, or you could stick a franchise tag on him. And people have a misconception of how that's going to work. There's the cap percentage average formula. It's not going to apply to him. It's going to be 120% of his prior year's salary. But for these purposes, prior year's salary it basically means his cap number. His cap number is 25.5 million. There are a couple of things you got to add. You take out before you do the 20% calculation, add back in, but it's going to be at least 30.2 million. It could be 30.45 million because if he's on the Pro Bowl again, the original ballot, then his incentive this would be likely be earned, and that would count against the cap. So you're talking basically 30 million for a franchise tag. And if you were potentially willing to have him at 30 million next year on a 1 year deal, then you should be able to extrapolate what he's worth long term. Another thing you got to look at, he's a number one receiver. There's a market for number one receivers. There's a market for number two receivers. I don't know any competent agent that would accept money on an extension that didn't at least top what the highest paid number two receiver is
Right.
getting. That's T. Higgins.
Right.
T. Higgins may be a number one receiver on other teams, but on the Bengals, he is the number two to chase Jamar Chase, who's the
Right.
highest paid non quarterback, being the number one. The highest paid number two receiver has a 4 year extent deal. It wasn't an extension, he's a franchise player, averaging 28.75 million per year. So if the Commanders are trying to come in below T. Higgins, there's not going to be much that's going to entice Terry's camp to try to get this thing done.
So, and that's so where do you think the sweet spot is then when you're looking at all this? Because it is, I've always said this is a tricky one because of the age and because of all these other factors. And like, yeah, it's 30, but he's only been in the league 7 years. So the wear and tear is different. How much is that factor? So where's the sweet spot, do you think, for all of this?
Well, you'd like to get above DK Metcalf if you are McLaurin's agent. You may not necessarily get there, but I don't think there's a deal to be done if you don't at least get to Brandon Ayuk, who's at 30 million per year.
Right.
Younger, he was 26 when he signed with the 49ers. That's 4 years, 120 million is the new money. He had, I think, 76 in overall guarantees and 45 fully guaranteed at signing. So I think you have to get in the 30s for a deal to get done. A question I would pose to Adam Peters, and if I got the wrong answer, we have a problem is who's the better football player, Terry or Brandon? If he doesn't want to answer that question because he knows if he says Terry, I'm
Uh-huh.
going to use that against him. Or if he doesn't want to answer it because he thinks Brandon's better. But I try to put him on the spot and pin him down on that particular one. Another thing you could potentially look at is let's just adjust his current deal, which the base value was 23.2 million on the 3-year extension. That's the new money for cap inflation. The cap's gone up 34.1% since he signed in 2022. That puts you at right around 31.125 million per year. So there are several ways you could look at it to try to figure out what would make sense where he's not getting practically what he wants, and maybe the Commanders are stretching a little bit more than they want to. But sometimes the best deal, or the right deal, I should say, not best, the right deal is one where both sides are a little uncomfortable.
And I was going to ask you that too, because what you hear from fans is pay him whatever he wants. There's a danger in that. So like if you can, what is, you can't do that, right? I mean, how would you if somebody tells you that, like, what's the response?
Yeah, in a vacuum, maybe that makes sense. But then when
Right,
you start drilling down, what does he actually want? I don't know. I haven't talked
right,
to either party, but either side. But let's say he saw that Jamar Chase reset the market in a significant manner. And he wants to reap the benefit of Jamar Chase coming in at 40.25 million per year and close the gap between that and second in the receiver hierarchy, which is Justin Jefferson at 35 million per year. There's no way the Commanders are going to do that
right,
if
right,
that's what he's thinking. So yeah, you have to qualify the pay him whatever he wants, because Chase and Jefferson to me are on a different tier.
right,
So that's those. I don't. That's out of the question to me. So Metcalf makes more sense as, let's use that as a guide.
right,
If you looked at their overall statistics since they came in the same year, and DK has had better quarterback play,
right.
although he's had different quarterbacks. He got Russell Wilson before the decline, then Geno Smith. Terry's been more productive.
Yeah.
So you can point to things where it should be a little above DK, but I can understand why if you had teams look at the two, they would be intrigued by the physical gifts that Metcalf has that I don't know too many other receivers in the league right now possess.
Right. And I was going to ask you that too, because one of the things like people get freaked out about, like moving on from him. I don't see that in a million years, right? Like I just don't see that. But could you even see another team saying, okay, we'll give them picks or whatever, and then pay Terry 30 some million? That seems like it'd be a bit far fetched.
Well, you have all these people speculating on what are the good landing spots if the Commanders try to trade him. Commanders are in win now mode. This
Right.
is a team that got to the final four of the NFL, NFC Championship game. You don't have anyone on the roster that is an obvious replacement should you trade him. That's not what you're trying to do. I know you got Debo Samuel in a trade, but the last time Debo Samuel was extremely productive was the year he got paid in
Right.
2021.
Right.
If Terry McLaurin had the same type of career trajectory as Debo Samuel, where his production started declining, we wouldn't be having a conversation about an extension right now. So I don't think there's anyone on the roster. You get worse without him around. You don't have a 2025 draft pick you could have used to replace him. The time to trade him would have been before the draft. So I don't even consider that a realistic
Right.
option.
I don't either. And it's like it comes up because, like you said, you see these stories like here are the landing spots for him. If this team would be interested, I have a hard time believing they would trade him, and I have a hard time believing somebody else would give up the compensation needed and then pay him what that deal is, considering then it goes back to the age, right?
Yeah,
So,
then someone else is assuming the problem. You'd have to really love
correct.
him and want him. Sometimes Familiarity brings comfort. Maybe there's a former coach someplace that really liked him and would go to bat for him and be like, "Hey, this is our guy." But one thing that hasn't come up or I didn't address is Dan Quinn knows what an elite receiver looks like because
Right.
he was the
Right.
coach of the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know if Dan Quinn in his mind is comparing him to Julio Jones, and maybe he's like, this ain't Julio Jones. Or maybe he's like, yeah, I see this guy's not quite as good as Julio Jones, but he's close. I don't know what if you ask Dan Quinn to give his candid assessment where he fits into the whole piece of the puzzle. I know he's a defensive coach.
Right.
Or Cliff Kingsbury. He had a elite receiver when he got to Arizona and DeAndre Hopkins initially. I don't know how he compares the two of those, but their input may be something which is being factored in the equation by Adam Peters in the front office.
Could be. And then Quinn also was with Dallas and CeeDee Lamb too, when Lamb really kind of blew up. So that, however the
Yeah, and
comparisons go.
I would rather have CeeDee Lamb out of the two.
And how much, last thing then, like how much should they factor in his importance to, again, not just on the field, but locker room and the fear, like if this doesn't get done, how does it play out in the locker room?
Yeah, that's something that should be part of the equation, but not an overriding consideration. The one thing which does cut in Terry's favor is you guys don't have to worry about a high price quarterback for a couple of years.
Right,
So
right,
if you're going to make an overpayment for someone or give the player the benefit of the doubt in the contract negotiation, you can do it. This would be a time to do it. So maybe it becomes a situation at some point, possibly not the beginning of the training camp, but as we get into training camp, if they go, you know what, we need to get this thing done. Let's go a little more than what we'd originally budget to close the deal. You can do that in this situation, given how successful you were last year. You're trying to take the next step forward, so you do actually need him happy and willing to produce, as opposed to I'm in my potentially my last year of 1 foot out the door.
right. And then I also look at when if you have two receivers playing for contracts, Debo and Terry, how much are they going to want the ball to get their numbers to get that next deal? So it'd be nice to take care of the primary one before the season to alleviate that issue, it would seem.
Yes, plus I'm not sold on Debo
Yeah,
because they're different players. He's great yards
very
after the
different.
catch.
Yeah,
That's what he excels there. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. It
yeah.
worked in San Francisco where well when they had Debo and McCaffrey on the field and they could kind of interchange them, which kept defenses guessing. I'm curious to see how they use him this year, but the declining production is kind of a red flag to me. Maybe contract year. There have been players in the past that contract year is when he blew up, was first team All Pro, and then a little bit of a lull, contract year, and then that guy
Right.
that we haven't seen in a couple of years resurfaces. You never know.
For sure. And because I also wondered, and this is the very last thing too, but is there a point where you're in camp where it's like you have to have this guy in because there's a history with not overwhelming, but like guys not having the same kind of years the longer it takes to get something done. So what to you is like the line where like you've got to get him in by this point?
Ideally, second preseason game at the latest. We saw last year with the 49ers that Brandon Ayuk, before the knee injury, wasn't the same guy he was the year
Right,
before. And then you have to worry about soft tissue injuries.
right,
I remember Darrell Reeves holdout several years ago, and he was always great. Came back, soft tissue injuries like a hamstring or something. So that's always a concern for guys who miss a significant portion of camp. Obviously, the hold in didn't affect Jamar Chase last year, but that's what you also have to factor in the equation. What will Terry do if you don't
right.
have a deal by the start of training camp? Was he going to hold out? And there are ramifications for that. It's a mandatory
Right.
$50,000 per day fine since he's on a veteran contract and didn't sign as an unrestricted free agent. It'd be more if he did sign as an unrestricted free agent. They can't waive that fine.
Right.
If he missed all training camp, that's over $2 million. Or does he try to spare himself the fine and hold in, where he's either going to be a non-participant or a limited participant and attend meetings. Last year, that seemed to bother Kyle Shanahan more with Brandon Ayuk than Trent Williams holding out. So I'm curious to see how he plays this if they don't have a deal done by the start of training camp or a day or two into it.
Going to be interesting to watch. Joel, I appreciate your time. And again, for people listening, go check out his article on CBSSports.com. Joel, anything else you want to plug right now?
Nope, that's it. I have no idea what I'm doing next week. I guess one other thing, last week's article it's more time sensitive, was on Trey Smith, the offensive guard that was given a franchise tag by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Commanders franchise is familiar with giving a franchise tag to offensive guards because it was done twice recently. But that number is so high, and trading Joe Thuney gives him a ton of leverage that it's up to the Chiefs to step up to the plate and try to get something done before Tuesday's 4 p.m. deadline, July 15th, for franchise players to sign long term. So check that one out as well.
Very good. And it's funny because it's hard for me to fathom how much guards are getting paid, because that's where the sport has gone. But back in the day, the only guard I pay that much is Michael Jordan. So different sport. So there you go.
Not the one that played in Washington, though.
No. So Joel, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Joel for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. Again, I'll be back on Thursday with another episode talking to Deebo Samuel's offseason trainer. I'll talk to you next time.